Hey everyone, this is Louis7 and welcome to my journey through King's Gondor, the new zone that is in the Update 36 beta for The Lord of the Rings Online. So we are starting our journey heading from the east to west in the new zone, and we actually start in this encampment of Harlond that we see right now. So Harlond is probably going to be the starter city as you start the new storyline in this update. And as we head out of the city, you can see that the landscape is quite different. This is the same area that we have in-game currently in Eastern Gondor, but of course it's after battle, so it's after the events of the war and even after the Great Wedding events. Now, one of the biggest things that I noticed and I'm seeing right here is that the sky is blue, so we no longer have the dawnless day atmosphere because it is after the war, and that's one of the big excitements in this update, and really just being able to explore a kind of similar area to what we had before. It's really the same landscape, same general layout, but it is in the after war environment, and to me it's just very appealing. I know for some people it could be a little bit of a disappointment because it's not all necessarily brand new landscape, but there are quite a bit of updates. I have to admit that I have not been to Eastern Gondor all that much recently in my LOTRO gameplay, but I just find it really refreshing to see some of the new things that they have added that I can tell, like those rocks that we were looking at. They added some of the new features that they have with that we have seen in Before the Shadow, for example, and again, just being in the post-war atmosphere. Now, as we continue this journey, I do want to talk a little bit about other things in the landscape just as I am seeing them. So obviously there are a whole lot of flowers in Eastern Gondor. They definitely continue that here in this update. And you start to see things open up a little bit as we are looking out into the distance here, again heading to the west. So we're kind of going towards central Gondor at this point. I think even when you cross the river, but that might technically be the old central Gondor. And it's kind of interesting seeing the progression from east to west in this case as things open up. I don't know that I would quite call what we are seeing here in central Gondor much of a prairie, but it is a lot less dense with trees and vegetation, mostly just grass and a little bit of rolling hills type landscape, and then a few trees. But yeah, it's a pretty peaceful journey at this point. I should talk a little bit about, well, there's the flying bears, a pretty interesting new feature in this update, but to actually talk about the wildlife, you do see that there are bears here, again, some flying bears. I don't know if that will be fixed, but there's also classic things from Breland. That's one of the big takeaways I actually had from my initial roaming in the new zones, is that it really reminds me of Breland because you have things like bears, wolves, boars, those classic enemies. There are a couple orcs here and there, but they're mostly gone because this is of course after the war. And then the entire zone seems to be run over with bandits, actually. Don't really see that many Corsairs. There are, as we'll get to in some of the encampments, there are actually some hints of Corsairs and Haradrim, but we mainly see, as far as human type enemies, that they are mainly bandits. I also will point out, as we're looking towards the north here, you can see the White Mountains, which is something that I feel like I haven't appreciated too much in my previous playthroughs of Central Gondor and Eastern Gondor specifically. I feel like in Western Gondor it's been a lot easier to appreciate them. I feel like at least partially because they are a more central part of the landscape and that you actually go around some of the mountain peaks, but maybe a little bit less so in Central and Eastern Gondor, so it is neat to see that connection. So as we are making our way close to, I believe that would be Pelargir that we're headed towards, I do want to talk a little bit more about the story. Now, this video is fairly spoiler free and mainly speculative because I have not actually paid attention at all to the story in beta because I want to save that for when the full update comes out. So what I am guessing is that after the war, there was a lot of cleanup efforts, and you're going to be working to kind of rebuild these areas in Gondor, as we are of course. Now, it does seem in the absence of the war and orcs and the such, there have been less concentrated efforts on enemies, so bandits have had the opportunity to run over the area and basically take over old encampments of both Haradrim Corsairs and even of orcs. So it's kind of interesting to see that. Also, as we are headed into Pelargir, this is again one of the places that I don't 100% remember what it was like during the war phase, but you can see that there is evidence of like rubble and a little bit of more destroyed buildings, but it does seem like there have been efforts to clean things up. That's at least the impression that I'm getting, is that some things have been patched since the war. And as we are crossing the bridge here, another thing that I have actually picked up on through this journey is just the sounds. Actually, you just hear people talking in the background. It is a populated city with a bunch of Gondorians. One thing that I have always found with some of these Gondor cities is that they can sometimes be annoying to navigate, not necessarily straightforward. That's not really a bad thing from a landscape world building perspective, but it can be from a navigating perspective. Fortunately, I am taking the easy route here and just going through the slow stable master ride to the western extent of what we have in this update, so it pretty much automatically takes me through here. But you can see it's quite a busy city with a lot of different paths to navigate, and then you also run into some texture loading issues. But moving on, we eventually do head out of Pelargir, and this at the end of Pelargir, after we get up these steps here, another thing that you might notice is that there are some Corsairs. They were there very briefly, perhaps a hint of some stuff to come, and a little bit of a teaser of us eventually sailing to Harad. Now, as we are looking at the mountains again, this is really where it starts to connect better to Western Gondor, which I don't remember if I explicitly mentioned this, but I like the world building in Western Gondor better than Central and Eastern Gondor, or at least I like the landscape. It's just more appealing to me personally. And being closer to Western Gondor, I really noticed that in the after battle phase of Gondor that we have here, so I'm just really appreciative to see that, and it looks like that will be the more visually appealing to me area in this update. Again, I don't have all these spoilers of the landscape in this video. There have been some other interesting things that I have seen. If you want to check out my other videos, I'll probably have footage of those, but for the purposes of this one, it's mostly just this straightforward journey from east to west. Now, the extent of what we have is actually in the middle of Central Gondor, so we actually don't even get to the border with Western Gondor. It will be in the middle of Central Gondor, and as we're getting actually towards the end of this journey, that does bring to question what will happen next with this area, because it's kind of strange that it's like the game is hinting that we will go even further west into like Western Gondor, but we do know that the expansion later this year will actually be going to Harad, going to Umbar more specifically in Harad. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Honestly, from what I've seen in game, it gives me a little bit of concern, but maybe that concern is for naught depending on how they implement it. As we're getting to the end here, again, I just have to appreciate the beauty of this area. I do have to comment though that unfortunately Gondor is still run over with ugly bushes. I'm thinking the next phase of Gondor, if they ever want to do that, could finally be the purge of ugly bushes. That would make Gondor, and if they did that throughout Middle Earth, make a lot more areas a whole lot more visually appealing to me, because honestly, I would love Gondor landscape, at least this King's Gondor landscape, if it weren't for the ugly bushes. But the ugly bushes, they're just so prevalent that they actually hold it back, and I know that might sound ridiculous, but that is how I feel about it. Anyway, it looks like we have come to the end of this journey, so I have run out of time. Please let me know what you think of the landscape and what you're excited for with it. Personally, I am looking forward to, basically as I always do with landscape updates, just questing and exploring the area in a little bit more detail, especially this post-war Gondor and the new types of enemies they have and really how they fit in is what I've been most interested in so far. There are of course a lot of other interesting landscape related things coming in the update, as well as just some other features in the update, so I'm excited to get more into that in the future. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video in a little bit different style. Please do let me know any feedback you have, and with that, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content, and thanks for watching everyone.